He almost didn't see the travel bag. What if the greatest betrayals are the ones we initially overlook? He'd walked right past it, absorbed in the mental replay of a text he'd never send. Keys clanged against the quartz countertop, worn sneakers kicked off with practiced ease, and a cloud of sharp, floral perfume, utterly alien to the subtle notes he once favored for her, lingered in the air. A low, off-key hum, a snippet of some upbeat pop anthem he now instinctively despised, drifted from her lips. Then she spun around, her eyes widening, fixating on the canvas duffel by the door. "You packed my things?" He didn't even lift his gaze from the sink. His hands moved methodically, rinsing the ceramic mug she'd used that very morning. A faint, smudged crescent of her lip color still clung to the rim. It was the same mug, the one he'd found for her during their first trip to Ashland, Oregon, adorned with a whimsical, wander-free stardust child. The lingering sentiment, the sting of still caring for such a small, shared token, was a bitter pill. "You said you needed your space," Ethan Lowry replied, his voice level. Mara Maxwell blinked, as if expecting him to retract the statement, to declare the suitcase an elaborate, ill-conceived joke. "I didn't mean that kind of space," she retorted, her tone already sharpening, a familiar edge creeping in. "I meant emotional space, a mental break, not whatever this is." But he had meticulously rehearsed this confrontation 1,000 times. In the quiet hum of traffic, during restless nights, in the silent moments as she laughed at someone else's messages. He knew her playbook, her attempt to twist the narrative, to blame his perceived overreactions, his supposed neediness, his lack of drive. He remained silent. She approached the bag, unzipping it with a slow, deliberate motion, as though anticipating a hidden letter, a desperate plea, or perhaps a long-forgotten ring. Instead, it held precisely what he'd placed inside: her clothes, her makeup, the ubiquitous phone charger, and the silk scarf she'd once sworn she could never live without. "You're actually serious?" It was then that Ethan finally met her gaze. His eyes were weary, etched with a decade of unspoken concessions. "I'm exhausted, Mara," he confessed. "Exhausted from constantly proving I'm a reason to stay." She folded her arms across her chest, a defensive gesture. "So, this is truly it, after everything." He could have meticulously cataloged the everything, the countless nights she hadn't returned, the password changes on her phone, the silent moments watching her face light up for a screen instead of for him. But he didn't. Instead, he dried his hands, took a deep, centering breath, and delivered his final word. "You already left. This merely formalizes your departure." Her mouth opened, then closed. No words emerged. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, she was utterly speechless. And for the first time in months, Ethan wasn't the one battling tears. She didn't storm out immediately. Instead, she stood frozen, a statue of disbelief, her body unable to process the blow to her carefully constructed ego. The packed suitcase sat beside her like an unyielding, undeniable truth. Ethan leaned against the kitchen island, arms crossed, waiting. Not for another argument. He'd heard every permutation of her anger. He was waiting for her facade to crumble. "You're throwing away 10 years because I asked for a little room to breathe?" she demanded, her voice quivering with a manufactured shock, the kind people deploy when caught red-handed. "No," he corrected. "I'm throwing away 10 years because you already did. I'm simply taking out the emotional trash you left behind." That one landed. Her jaw visibly tightened. She blinked rapidly, once, twice, before suddenly storming upstairs. He braced himself for the customary door slam, but it never came. Instead, she headed straight for her closet. The frantic crash of hangers, the violent slam of drawers, and the distant shattering sound of something, perhaps her ceramic diffuser, echoed through the house. Ethan remained rooted in the kitchen, listening to the cacophony of her desperate pretense of control. 10 minutes later, she reappeared, hauling a second bag, larger, messier, half unzipped. Her face was flushed, not from genuine sorrow, but from raw humiliation. This wasn't about heartbreak or regret. It was about the stinging embarrassment that He had initiated the departure before she could, that he had refused to grovel. "You'll regret this, Ethan," she muttered, snatching her purse. He merely shrugged. "Perhaps, but at least I won't spend every night wondering who you're texting." She stopped at the threshold, turning to face him. "There's nothing going on with anyone else, is there?" He fixed her with a long, weary look. The very phrasing of that question, laden with so many implicit doubts, rendered it a lie. With that, she exited. No embrace, no lingering pause, not even a backward glance. Just the distinct growl of her luxury SUV starting in the driveway, the same car he'd co-signed for when her credit was in shambles years ago. A fitting symmetry. But here's the secret truth no one tells you. Ethan had already seen everything he needed to. The late-night messages, the cryptic hotel reservation under her maiden name, the Lyft receipts from evenings she'd claimed were late nights at the office. He hadn't confronted her then. He hadn't needed to, because the moment she realized he wouldn't fight for her, that's when her carefully constructed world began to crack. He sank onto the couch, his couch now, and finally truly breathed. Yet the real storm, the profound reckoning, was still gathering on the horizon. The next 2 days unfolded in an unnatural, disquieting quiet. The entire house seemed to hold its breath. He half expected her to return, dramatically flustered, showering him with accusations like confetti, demanding to know how he dared let her leave without a desperate plea. But she didn't come back. Instead, the silence stretched, taut and suffocating. No texts, no missed calls, no convenient "I forgot my toothbrush" excuse to slither back in. This should have brought relief, but it intensified the unease. Such silence wasn't absence. It was calculated. She was waiting for him to break first, waiting for him to reach out, to apologize for overreacting, to resume the role he'd always played, pliable, forgiving, terrified of solitude. But he didn't. Instead, he poured his energy into the neglected corners of his life. He meticulously cleaned out the fridge. He replaced the shower curtain she'd always detested. He started sleeping sprawled across the entire bed, luxuriating in the newfound space. And still the silence held firm. Then late one night, a restless impulse led him to check the shared digital calendar, a relic untouched for months. That's when he saw it. Meeting 7:30 p.m., Dorsey Inn M. His stomach lurched. She was still logged in. She'd never revoked his access. Part of her likely assumed he'd never look, but he did. He clicked on the event, and under the notes, a sparse, damning directive. Don't forget, bring what he likes. Use the black dress. No name, no further details, just enough to irrevocably shatter him. He stared at the screen for what felt like hours. He wasn't even angry, not at first, just a profound, echoing hollowness. He had suspected, yes, but now he knew. And the knowing was infinitely worse. She wasn't merely seeing someone else. She was orchestrating it, selecting outfits, meticulously planning it like a business meeting. She was with someone who didn't have to beg for her attention, someone who received the radiant version of her he'd once prayed would return. And somehow she still believed he'd be the one to collapse first. But this time, he wouldn't. He wouldn't dissolve into tears on the floor like the night she didn't come home until 3 a.m. No, this time he would allow her to walk headfirst into the mess she'd created. And when she finally realized what she'd lost, she would be the one staring into a deafening silence that offered no answers. Ready to see how a quiet man exacts his true revenge. Ethan didn't sleep the night he discovered the calendar entry. He sat transfixed, eyes locked on the screen, rereading the same damning line, hoping it would somehow transform. Use the black dress. The very dress she'd worn on their third anniversary, the one she'd claimed made her feel like a movie star. He'd bought it for her. He'd zipped it up that first time, telling her she was the most breathtaking woman in any room. He'd meant every word. Now she probably let him unzip it. The image replayed on a relentless loop, a nauseating tableau until he felt physically ill. Yet he didn't break. He didn't call her. He didn't drive to the Dorsey Inn to catch them in the act. He didn't cry or scream or smash anything. That former version of him, the one who once begged for scraps of her affection, was irrevocably gone. Still, his hands trembled as he opened his laptop the next morning. He had an idea, not for revenge. He wasn't that kind of man. But he craved clarity, truth. So he did what he'd avoided for months. He logged into their shared cloud drive. She always saved screenshots there. Recipes, photos, reminders, all neatly organized into folders labeled Dream Life and Future Goals. One folder, nestled inconspicuously near the bottom, was simply titled M. His throat tightened. He clicked. It wasn't photos of them. It was him. Him at a chic rooftop bar. Him holding her hand by a serene lake house. Him in bed, shirtless, with her vibrant hair sprawled across his chest like a trophy. He couldn't discern what stung more, the raw, visceral betrayal, or the fact that she had meticulously documented it all like a cherished fairy tale. No shame, no hint of guilt, just undeniable proof that he had been systematically erased and replaced. And yet, in that moment, anger gave way to a strange, unsettling calm. He realized something profound. She had expected him to find this eventually. She wanted it to destroy him. She wanted him to chase her, to beg for explanations, to remind her that she was still desired, even after her treachery. That was her insidious game, but he wasn't playing it anymore. He closed the folder, created a thorough backup of every single file, and began planning something else entirely. Not for her, but for him. Because if she could abandon everything they'd built and smile while doing it, then he could finally stop waiting at the door, like a lost dog. And this time, when she inevitably came crawling back, and he knew with chilling certainty she would, it wouldn't be him who begged. 3 days later, he received a text message he wasn't meant to see. It was a screenshot, forwarded by a mutual acquaintance, a real estate agent who had inadvertently been included in a group chat Mara intended for her closest confidants. Here's what no one tells you about betrayal. The final blow often comes from an unexpected source. There she was, his now ex, standing triumphantly in front of a sleek new apartment, keys in hand, beaming as if she just won the lottery. The caption read, "Fresh start. No more dragging dead weight." Dead weight. That's what he had become to her. Not a partner, not the man who'd painstakingly built a life with her, who'd sacrificed his own dreams for hers. Just a burden, easily shed like dust from her designer boots. The group chat erupted in celebratory emojis, fire, hard eyes. One of her friends even chimed in, "Finally free." He sat on the edge of the bed, reading the words over and over. It wasn't just the cutting phrase itself, it was the way she looked, so vibrantly alive, so undeniably relieved, as if escaping him was the most liberating decision she'd ever made. He should have been crushed, and a part of him was. But then something else took root. Not anger, not vengeance, but a quiet, chilling finality. There was nothing left to salvage. No apology could mend this. No cherished memory could rewrite this stark reality. She had already rewritten their story without him, so he began making changes of his own, quietly, methodically. He closed their joint bank account and opened one solely in his name. He contacted the landlord, removing her name from the lease. He canceled their shared car insurance policy. He didn't even tell her. Let her feel the weight she believed he was. Let her experience what it felt like when the foundation she took for granted vanished beneath her feet. Then 2 nights later, she called him. Not a text, not a voice note, but a full-fledged phone call. He didn't answer. She called again and again. The fourth time, he let it ring. The fifth, he finally picked up. Her voice was shaky, not furious, but fragile. "Ethan, why did you freeze the account?" He paused, letting the silence stretch, heavy and pregnant, before responding. "I figured you didn't need my dead weight slowing you down anymore." She didn't speak for 5 long seconds. Then a barely audible whisper, "I didn't mean it like that." But that's the immutable truth about messages. You don't get to dictate how they're received when you send them behind someone's back. And in that precise moment, he realized something that left him colder than he ever thought possible. He didn't care what she meant. He cared only about what she did. Why does "I didn't mean it" always come too late? She arrived the next day. He heard the urgent knock before he even saw her face, and he already knew this wouldn't be a calm encounter. Mara never handled silence well. It made her nervous, exposed. He opened the door, and there she stood on the porch, wearing that same black dress from the calendar note. But it didn't dazzle now. It looked desperate, wrinkled at the hem, as if it had been hastily pulled from the back seat of her car in a panic. "We need to talk," she declared, foregoing any pretense of a smile. He allowed her entry. She moved through the house as if she still belonged, as if the faint scent of her old shampoo hadn't already faded from the pillows. Her eyes scanned the room, registering the subtle shifts, the missing picture frames, the empty side of the closet, the impeccably clean kitchen counter where her half-finished lattes used to sit for days. "You changed everything," she whispered, her voice barely audible. He simply nodded. "You left. I merely rearranged the aftermath." She looked at him, truly looked, and for the first time he saw it. Uncertainty. Not regret, not yet, but a nascent fear. The kind that creeps in when you realize your carefully constructed backup plan isn't waiting dutifully at the door, precisely as you assumed it would be. "I made a mistake," she finally admitted, her voice trembling just enough to sound genuine. "It wasn't what you think." But he had stopped granting her the power to define his reality long ago. "You thought I'd wait," he stated flatly, "while you decided if I was still worth the trouble." Her silence was admission. She sank onto the couch, as if this were a negotiation, as if he'd somehow forgotten the damning photos, the cutting messages, the group chat that labeled him dead weight. "Ethan, I don't want this to end." He almost laughed, not out of amusement, but from the sheer, raw pathos of it. She wanted the comfort back, not the man. She wanted the version of him who would apologize for her betrayal just to keep her close. "It already ended," he said. "You just showed up late to the funeral." She flinched as if he'd physically struck her. Good, he thought, because no amount of mascara, no amount of pleading, no amount of backtracking could mend what she had so gleefully shattered. She rose to leave, moving slower this time. At the door, she turned as if performing the final act in a play she'd never fully rehearsed. "I didn't think you'd actually move on," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. He met her gaze, unflinching. "That's the last thing you didn't think I'd do." With that, he closed the door. Not loudly, not angrily, but with an echoing, resonant finality. After she left that day, he thought he'd feel victorious. He thought slamming the door on her hollow apology would bring closure, perhaps even satisfaction. Instead, he felt a strange, quiet peace, as if the version of him who had waited, begged, dissected her tone, and searched her face for signs of love. That man had finally died, and he was mourning him less and less with each passing hour. 2 days passed without contact. This time the silence didn't sting. It felt earned, a hard-won victory. Then on the third day, he ran into her by accident at the grocery store, of all places. She stood in the frozen aisle, clutching a pint of vanilla oat milk ice cream, the very kind they used to share on the couch during bad movies. When she saw him, her posture stiffened. She attempted to feign surprise, as if she hadn't intentionally donned the same jacket he'd once told her made her look unreachable in a good way. But it didn't work. Her smile was thin, fragile, a transparent mask. "Hey," she offered, as if they were casual exes bumping into each other in a saccharine romantic comedy. "Hey," he replied, genuinely calm. He wasn't faking it anymore. Her eyes scoured his, likely expecting to find sadness, confusion, that familiar wounded glaze he used to wear like a badge of loyalty. Instead, he smiled. Nothing dramatic, just a relaxed, tired, honest smile. That's when her expression cracked, just a fraction. "You look different," she said as if it bothered her. "I feel different," he countered. Freedom tends to do that. Her grip on the ice cream tightened. She nodded too quickly. "I was actually going to text you," she blurted out. "We should talk." He tilted his head. "We already did. You just didn't like the ending." The silence between them was brief but suffocating. Finally, she managed, "So that's it?" He nodded. "Yeah, that's it. I don't need a sequel. As he walked away, he caught her reflection in the glass of the freezer door, shoulders slumped, mouth slightly agape, eyes uncertain whether to cry or give chase. But she didn't move. Because this time, he wasn't an open door. He wasn't a convenient backup plan. He was gone. And for once, she was the one frozen in place. And somehow that quiet moment in a fluorescent lit aisle said everything he'd never had the strength to say when she still lived in his house. Weeks flowed into weeks, the kind of time that usually blurs into an indistinct haze. But these weeks were sharp, focused, honest. He started doing things he hadn't done in years. He cooked actual meals instead of microwaving sadness. He walked every morning with no set destination, just crisp air filling his lungs, and the palpable weight of her absence lifted from his shoulders. He even signed up for a woodworking class at the community center, something he'd always wanted to try, but Mara had dismissed it as pointless and messy. Funny how true healing begins when the incessant noise finally leaves your life. One night he sat on the porch, watching the sky soften into that gentle gray blue before the stars emerge. He felt no bitterness, no longer the victim of some grand betrayal. He felt simply like someone who had survived himself. And then, with the unsettling predictability of a ticking clock, his phone buzzed. Her name illuminated the screen again. Not a call this time, just a message. I miss us. I'm sorry. Can we at least talk? But he didn't reply. Not out of hatred, not because he wanted her to suffer, but because the man she had left, the one who waited, doubted, and begged, was gone. And he liked the man who had replaced him infinitely more. He stood, walked inside, and deleted the entire thread without reading anything else. No dramatic goodbye, no need for a closure session, just a clean slate. This changed his life in 30 days, letting go of the need for an explanation. That night he slept better than he had in years, not because he'd found someone new, not because karma had finally caught up to her, but because he had found peace within himself. A real, quiet, unshakable peace. The kind she had never taught him how to have, and that somehow felt far more profound than any revenge could ever be.